Hello, friends. This is another love story for bedtime. Get comfortable in your beds, fall asleep to the sound of rain, and listen to a wonderful bedtime story. The rain had been speaking all evening, whispering against window panes, drumming along gutters, stitching silver lines across the night. Lightning stitched its own seams through the low, bruise-colored clouds, and the thunder followed like a tired dog a few heartbeats later. In such weather, the town of Greyhaven felt like a secret cupped in the hands of the sea, a place where voices carried softly because the rain decided which words were allowed to travel and which ones were better left to soak into the earth. Maya Valen stepped off the late bus with a small suitcase, a wool coat that had once belonged to her grandmother, and a folded letter in her pocket. The platform glistened. Puddles rippled as if tiny fish lived in them. A strip of neon from the station cafe trembled in the water like a pulse. She lifted her collar and breathed in that damp, ionized air, part salt, part pine, part the warm iron smell that rides in ahead of a storm. Lightning flared beyond the roofs. The rain answered, steady and intimate as breath. "Welcome back," the rain seemed to say. Or perhaps that was just how memories sounded after too long away. Greyhaven hadn't changed much. It still wore the sea like a shawl and the clouds like a crown. The harbor bells rang dully through the mist. Foghorns stitched their low vowels between the streets, and the lighthouse, out on a spit of rock that looked like a sleeping animal, swung its beam in slow, reassuring sweeps. The light crossed the town's wet shingles and paused for just a blink on Maya's face. She smiled without meaning to. As a child, she had counted those sweeps to fall asleep, the way some children count sheep. Tonight the rhythm was the same, and the rain and the distant thunder muttering to itself, familiar as an old lullaby, though she had been gone a decade. She took the long way from the station, past the grocer, where crates of rain-flecked lemons perfumed the street, past the cafe with its fogged-up windows, and the chalkboard that always read today's soup. Yes, Greyhaven humor, she thought. The joke tasted like home. The bookstore sat on the corner where Harbor met Willow, a narrow-limbed building with a green door and a brass bell that never rang quite the same way twice. Umbra and ink, the hand-painted sign said, with a little crescent moon tucked into the ampersand. Her grandmother had kept the place for 40 years, weathering every storm, setting a kettle on the back shelf, as if tea were a spell against loneliness. After she died in the spring, Maya told herself she would come for a week, sort the papers, close the accounts, decide what to do with the old place. Weeks turned to months. The letter in her pocket had arrived 2 days ago, written in her grandmother's looping hand, and postmarked the winter before she passed, delayed somehow in the mysterious currents of the mail. "Come home when the rain begins," the letter had said. "The shop will tell you the rest." Lightning bleached the street. Rain ticked from the awnings in crystal strings. Maya fit her key into the lock, but the door wouldn't turn. It hesitated, then stuck as if the wood had swollen with weather and memory both. She bent to try again, hair curling damp against her cheek. That was when a man stepped out from the narrow entryway of the building next door, shaking an umbrella like a dog shakes itself after a swim. "Here," he said, reaching past her with an easy steadiness. "These doors swell when the wind comes in from the south. Lift and turn together." He smelled faintly of cedar and the kind of wind that lives on open water. He had rain in his eyelashes, and that lighthouse look about him, the weathered grace of someone accustomed to being small inside a great, beautiful force. His hands were brown with sun, even in this ocean of storm. He was not old the way the town was old. He was 30, perhaps a little more. The lightning flashed again, and for an instant it made a silver necklace of the raindrops in his hair. Maya lifted as he said, turned, and the door gave way with a grumpy sigh. The bell chimed a note that wobbled like a fawn finding its legs. "Thank you," she said, stepping into the smell of dust and paper and tea leaves that still hung in the air. Her voice sounded softer under the rain. "I used to know this door. I should have remembered how to talk to it." "Nothing wrong with forgetting," he said, staying beneath the awning and keeping the umbrella angled so the rain shunned him politely. "Forgetting gives remembering somewhere to go." He tilted his chin toward the dark interior. "Power's cut to save the lines in storms like this. Do you need a lantern? I'll find the candles." Maya flicked on her phone's flashlight, and dozens of tiny rainbows leapt from the plastic-wrapped book jackets, dancing in the beam like tame lightning. "I grew up in this shop." "So did half this town," he said, smiling with one corner of his mouth. "I learned the word literal from the dictionary right over there, and the taste of cinnamon tea from the kettle out back. Your grandmother told me stories when the weather was like this. She said the rain makes better listeners of us all." "She always said that," Maya answered, not knowing until the words left her how badly she had wanted someone else to have heard it too. "I'm Elia's," he said. A thunder roll padded across the roofs, close now, friendly as a cat. "I'm up the hill at the lighthouse. If you need anything, nails, rope, a thermos of decency, come knock." Is decency served with sugar? She surprised herself by teasing. The shop seemed to tilt toward it, like a ship toward wind. "Perhaps some places unlearn you and then teach you back." "Only on Wednesdays," he said gravely, but his eyes were amused. They were the color of sea glass you only find after a storm's soft green, rubbed down by time. "I'm on the midnight shift tonight. Signals fickle in lightning. Keep a candle handy. And if you can't sleep well, turn to 103.4. I read the storm letters." "The what?" "You'll see," he said. He tapped the umbrella against his boot, a friendly farewell. "Stay dry as you can, Maya of Umbra and ink." "How did you?" "Your grandmother kept everyone's names like spices on a rack," he said. "I sat at the back table one spring and fixed the bell pull with a pocket knife. She paid me in stories and pie. Good night." The umbrella tipped, threaded between them. Then he was a shape in it, and then part of the rain itself, moving uphill toward the seam of light where the lighthouse stood. The bell above Maya's door trembled once more and fell still. She set her suitcase behind the counter and sent her flashlights glow up to the ceiling, listening to the storm. It filled the shop as surely as air. The dust motes rose and fell like plankton in a dark ocean of books. Her grandmother's chair waited by the back table, a shawl folded on its arm. Every shelf held small, ordinary miracles. A note folded into the pages of a used atlas, a pressed clover in a poetry volume, a faint pencil sketch of a gull on a receipt tucked in a weather anthology. Maya's throat tightened. She had meant to be brisk, take stock, make lists, do the practical things grief demands like taxes. But the rain had other ideas. It inked the silence in, softened the edges, made room for the old ache to sit down and share the tea. She found the kettle anyway. The habit made her hands calm. While the water heated on the small gas ring, she lit 3 candles and set them in the water glass lanterns her grandmother favored, cloudy glass that made the flames look like minnows swimming in amber. Lightning knocked briefly at the windows. Thunder answered, further off now, dragging its old bones down the coast. The kettle sang, a clear voice in the rain's choir. Only then did she unfold the letter. The paper had the faint silt smell of something carried too long inside another thing. Her grandmother's hand ran across the page in that confident, looping script that made even grocery lists look like invitations to a ball. Come home when the rain begins. The shop will tell you the rest. Maya traced the words as if they might warm under her finger. What rest? She asked aloud, and the rain knocked on the glass as if to say, listen. She did. At first, only weather, then a second, softer sound from the back room, like a fingernail tapping a jar. She carried her candle, the flame pelting sideways at a draft, and pushed open the storeroom door. The smell of twine and old cardboard welcomed her, as familiar as the smell of her own skin. On the far shelf, a line of apothecary jars caught the candlelight. Some were empty, some held buttons, sea glass, stamps, the strange little gleanings of a long, attentive life. One jar had been set a little apart, and inside it was a folded square of sea blue paper bound with string. She lifted the jar, and it tapped her ring with a clear note, the sound she'd heard. The paper had a name in her grandmother's hand. For the first night, SHECOMES home. Maya broke the string with a feeling that was not unlike breaking the surface of the sea after a long dive. The paper unfolded to a single sentence. When the rain is a drum, bring the bell. She frowned. The bell. The shop bell chimed of its own mind. There was no bringing it anywhere. She checked the shelves, ran her fingers along the familiar hooks where bags once hung, crouched to open the old biscuit tin of coins. Lightning paused to watch her through the window. The rain leaned in like a friend who doesn't know how to whisper. Then she saw the shape beneath the back table, a small wooden box, scarred by years of being kicked aside. Half the lid was carved with a moon, the other half with a bell. Her grandmother had loved symbols, as if letters weren't enough without little pictures to carry their moods. Inside the box lay a hand bell, bronze gone damp green in its grooves, its handle wrapped in blue cord. She could almost feel her grandmother's hand in the worn places. When she lifted it, the bell was heavier than it looked. She rang it once, hesitantly. The note it made was round and patient. It swelled and settled. The rain grew quiet enough to listen to it. Even the thunder seemed to lean its chin on its paws. The bell's sound didn't so much end as move outward, into the shop, into the street, up the hill. Maya found herself at the front door before she meant to be, opening it to the weather. The beam from the lighthouse passed across the rain at that moment, and in its wake, the drops turned briefly to coins of light, spinning down into the street's cupped palms. Across the way, above the cafe, a radio in an upstairs window clicked on and crackled. A man's voice, low and careful, filled the street the way a tide fills a basin. Good midnight, Greyhaven. It's a diligent rain tonight. If you're awake, you're not alone. The lines are open, the kettle is on, the light is turning. We begin with a letter found beneath an eave. The ink runs sweetly thin. It's called for the first night she comes home. Maya stood in the doorway, with the bell still warm in her hand. Elias' voice. She knew it was his, moved like the lighthouse beam. Steady, unhurried, impossible to mistake once heard. The rain made soft static on the speaker. A little thunder smiled to itself offshore, and then he read. And his reading was like someone tying a ribbon around the night, so it wouldn't fall apart. When the rain is a drum, Elias read, bring the bell. Maya's breath left her, her grandmother's sentence, traveling across the storm, finding its way to her from a window above the cafe, as if the town itself had decided to speak through many mouths at once. How had he gotten the letter? How many such letters were there, blurred by weather and luck and the tender incompetence of rooflines? She looked up at the lighthouse. Its beam slid across her face, lingered, moved on. It reminded her of a hand brushing back hair. It reminded her of all the small, ungilded ways people love each other in a town that learns your name and doesn't misplace it even after you do. I'll be reading until the hour tips, Elias said on the radio, his voice warm as tea. If you've tucked a storm letter under an eave tonight, we might find it. If you've returned after years away, we might be reading yours already. Listen, the rain remembers more than we do. Maya closed the door and sat on the rug by the counter with her grandmother's bell in her lap, and the candle lights around her like little moons that had agreed to come inside out of the weather. The radio voice from across the street threaded itself into the scaffolding of the storm. Her coat steamed gently as it dried. The bell was heavier than grief, lighter than the fear of beginning. She rang it once more, very softly, and the note she made merged with the rain until the difference between sound and silence seemed beside the point. On the back of the sea blue paper, there was one more line in her grandmother's hand, so faint she had to tip it toward the candle to see. He will come with the light when the storm turns. Maya traced the sentence and smiled for the first time all day with all her teeth, the way children smile at a surprise. Outside, lightning laid a bright thread across the horizon, then tucked it away again. The rain went on speaking, patient, constant, 1,000 voices saying one thing: stay, stay, stay. She stayed. The rain drummed the roof like soft fists, steady and tireless, the kind of rhythm that makes clocks unnecessary. Somewhere out in that low, breathing dark, lightning stitched pale edges around the clouds and unstitched them again. The radio voice wandered between the books, rising and thinning with the static of the downpour. Poems found under porch steps, a recipe rescued from a drain, a soggy page of a child's diary that had turned every S into a river. Maya sat cross-legged on the rug with the bell on her knees and let the sound of Elias reading fold the room smaller and warmer. At 2:30, by the old brass clock, its tick patient as a sleeping animal, the rain changed key. It was a subtle thing, like the difference between a heartbeat at rest and a heartbeat after a deep breath. The air moved from the south to the west. The long, loose ribbon of storm tightened and drew itself along the coastline. The lighthouse beam sharpened its pale arm, sweeping the street, the harbor, the sleeves of rain, so sure and slow that it felt like a promise you could drink. On the back of the sea blue paper, her grandmother's faint second line waited: he will come with the light when the storm turns. Maya stood before she knew she meant to. She set the bell down, then picked it up again. It felt like leaving a hand behind to go unheld. She went to the door and rested her palm on the cool glass. The beam moved across her skin, a hush of brightness that made the night look briefly like day underwater. The thunder softened its voice, not tired, just older. Rain webbed the doorway with silver threads, each one catching a little of the street's stray light. The bell's note was gentler this time, a careful, "I am here," instead of "Where is everyone?" The sound seemed to tuck itself under the awning and wait. Footsteps came up the hill in the rain, unhurried, as if they were keeping time with the beam. Elias appeared not out of shadow so much as out of weather, a shape threaded with water and wind. He carried a canvas satchel slung crosswise and a thermos clamped under his arm. His hair had decided to be its own small storm. When he stepped into the cone of light from Maya's doorway, he looked like the sort of person a town trusts with its secrets, because he knows how to carry weight without making it heavier. "You rang," he said, and because the line was simple, and because it belonged to older stories, it loosened something in her chest that had been cinched tight all evening. "I rang," she said. "The bell told me to. That tracks." He shifted the thermos into his hand, knocked locked his boots on the threshold and kept himself just inside the awning so as not to drown her floor. Your grandmother and I had an understanding. When the wind turned, if the shop needed a friend with rope or a stubborn shoulder, she rang. Sometimes it meant, bring the letters. Sometimes it meant, the kettle is ready, pretend you're surprised. Tonight, I gambled on both. He held up the satchel. The canvas was dark with rain, its seams gleaming. Maya stepped back so he could enter. The bell above the door loosed a damp, valiant chime. Inside, the shop was a twilight of candles and paper. Elias unslung the bag and set it on the counter with a respect usually reserved for fragile instruments or sleeping animals. He unscrewed the thermos and poured. Steam unfurled against the steady draft. The tea smelled like cinnamon and orange peel, and whatever spice is born on the edge of a storm. Storm letters, Maya asked, nodding toward the satchel as she cupped both hands around the heat. Storm letters, he said. East fence at the tall house with the widow's walk. Under the third stair at the blue duplex. Stuffed in the rope locker at Pier 3. Tucked behind the rain barrel by the bakery, where the scones keep pretending to be rocks. People write when it rains things they mean, things they hope they mean, things they'd like the weather to say for them, because weather can keep a secret until it decides not to. And you collect them. I collect what doesn't disintegrate, he said, smiling ruefully, and I read what legs have carried to, where a voice can help it travel. Your grandmother used to do this before me. When her knees started arguing with ladders, I took the climbing parts. She did the sorting and the tea after he didn't finish and didn't need to. The rain filled the word he didn't say and carried it quietly away. I've been keeping the ritual, but the letters miss her hands. Maya's palms warmed around the mug. The tea seemed to lay a small sun beneath her skin. She left notes, she said, tapping the bell. In jars, like messages to a future she had faith in. The shop will tell you the rest. Bring the bell. He will come with the light. She was counting on you. She was counting on you, too, Elias said. And the way he said it, like he was placing the sentence on the counter for her to take when she was ready, made it land softly. The last week I saw her, she said, when the rain knows to go west again, she'll come home, make room. So I kept a space in the reading and a space in the satchel. He loosened the satchel strap and opened the flap. Inside, bundles of paper, each wrapped in waxed string, each beaded with rain. Some were written on napkins, some on the backs of receipts, one on the flattened box of a breakfast cereal that boasted crunch proof against milk, but not at all proof against weather. The bundle on top was different. A sheet of rough, sea blue paper like the one Maya held earlier, the corners bent by time rather than storm. Across the front, in her grandmother's looping hand, for Maya, when the bell rings again, she didn't know whether to open it or simply press it to her chest and carry it upstairs to the old bed and sleep like a child under a map of stars she finally recognized. answered for her with a soft insistence against the door. Now, now, now. She untied the string. The paper exhaled its old paper smell, a breath saved in a jar for this hour. The ink had thinned to the gray of a tide line. There were 3 short instructions. Sweep open the listening wall. Make tea for 2. Let the rain say what you cannot. Maya looked up, question in her eyebrow. The listening wall. Elias stepped to the back room door, and with the casual choreography of someone who had done it a dozen times without making a fuss, pressed his thumb to a small bump in the molding. A panel slid free with the reluctant grace of a secret politely revealed. Behind it hung a narrow cupboard of cork and twine and humble magic, clippings and notes, and thin cords connecting pins to pins like the town's own nervous system, names written in pencil arced to addresses, recipes arced to birthdays. A crude map of the harbor was stitched with colored thread. In the center, a paper label in her grandmother's hand, read, LISDNING wall, in a script that looked like sound waves, high, low, calm again. People came here when it rained, Elias said softly. They spoke more slowly. They left notes when the thing they wanted to say had more room for ink than for air. Your grandmother saved those notes, and with their permission, or with their silence that meant permission, read them on nights like this. She called them the storm letters. She thought towns are better at loving each other when they remember out loud. Maya reached for a pin near the bottom. A child's drawing of a cat sat beneath it. The cat long of body and important of whisker, with a note. When I grow up, I will be a vet and also a cat. Someone, her grandmother, surely had added in smaller script. Both seem possible. In the top corner, a brittle clipping. Couple RUNITED BY on-air message after 20 years. The photo was mostly rain, but the faces were bright, startled by their own luck. A thin blue thread ran from the clipping to a card that read in careful print, "Thank you for ringing the bell." H&M. It's a map of promises the rain kept, Maya said, and the sentence surprised her by arriving made, as if it had been waiting for her mouth to open. Exactly, Elias said. And if the rain sometimes keeps a secret instead, we leave an empty pin where it might decide to speak later. They stood a moment, listening to the soft machine of weather. Somewhere in the stacks, an old hardback sighed as its pages swelled a fraction and then settled. Lightning brushed the windows with a pale hand. The kettle hissed a little from the back burner, as if to say, I participate. Maya brewed a fresh pot. The steam lifted the smell of cinnamon and orange again. But this time, she added 2 cloves and a thin, rain-bright slice of lemon, because some nights are generous and want a third flavor. You read on 103.4, she said, pouring. How did that begin? Jerry at the station says the signal travels better in rain. Something about how water makes the world one big ear, Elias said. We started as a safety thing. Flood updates, closed roads, who needs sandbags, who has extra candles. Then your grandmother suggested we leave 10 minutes at the top of the hour for notes. 10 became 20, then on storm nights, the whole midnight hour. She said, if the rain is going to keep us awake, the least it can do is make us kinder. Maya smiled into her cup. She would have liked that you've made it a habit. She would have liked that you're here to reclaim the bell, he said, and his eyes, sea glass green, held hers without tense or thread. And if you decide not to, if you choose city lights over lighthouse light. She also left me a list of instructions for how to complain about that to no one in particular, until the rain gets bored and makes me stop. The honesty of it, his willingness to lay choice between them without designing the outcome, made the room feel bigger. It made her breath feel like a thing she didn't have to ration. I meant to sell, she said. The rain tapped the window as if to ask, are you sure that's what you meant? She shrugged at the glass. Or I thought I meant to sell. But there's a wall that listens, and a town that writes to its weather, and a bell that knows when to ring. It's possible I miscalculated. Miscounting is just counting with the wrong weather, he said. You adjust. They cataloged the satchel together. 3 bundles for the archives. 1 for the morning. Birth announcements written on receipts. He is perfect, even in rain. A recipe for storm bread to be shared at the shelter. A note that said simply, I am sorry, and another that answered, so AMI, come home. A limp bouquet tag that read for the girl at the BOOKSHOP, who recommended the novel with the blue house. Thank you for making me cry about someone else's life when mine hurt. Maya pinned that last one to the listening wall and drew a light string from it to promised. May 11, make room for sorrows, not ours. Her grandmother's handwriting again. The date was 2 springs back. The habit of care made the air feel warmer. At the very bottom of the cupboard, curled against the seam like a cat too shy to be counted, a small red ledger waited. Maya, said the spine in pencil that had faded until the Y was almost an X. She opened it to the first page in her grandmother's script. Accounts of what matters below that. A list that was not money. PROMISES, the rain kept, with dates. A coat returned. A fight mended. A roof line repaired by 4 neighbors and a ladder. An engagement begun with a soggy proposal that read, will you? On one side, and of course on the other, because the first side had bled. Halfway down the page, a line with no date yet. The day Maya says yes to what has been waiting. Space left after it, 3 lines wide, as if her grandmother wanted the moment to be roomy. The beam passed over the window again. The rain was not lessening so much as gentling. A hand easing on a shoulder it trusts. Out at the harbor, a horn sounded once, low and contented. The clock ticked its patient syllables. I should get back to the light, Elias said at last, tugging his hood up. When the storm turns, the channel shoals can be finicky. Boats believe they know what the water will always do. Boats are often wrong. And people, Maya asked lightly. People do better, he said, pulling the door open. The bell chimed its damp little bravery again. We get rained on, and then we we say what we meant to say. And the next day, we move the buckets. And the day after that, we buy better buckets. Practical romance, she said, a Greyhaven specialty. At Umbra and Ink, it's a house blend, he returned. He hesitated in the doorway, the rain stitching between them. If you want the hour before dawn on the station tomorrow, it's yours. Read the morning bundle, or don't. Either way, I'll be listening. Make tea for two, Maya said, tapping the list with her fingernail. The instructions are clear. He lifted the thermos in salute. I'll bring mine. Good night, Meyer of the Bell. Good night, Elias of the Light. The door closed behind him, and his footsteps softened back into the rain's wide footstep. The lighthouse beam swept. The shop exhaled as if it had been holding something and could finally put it down. Maya set the red ledger on the counter and wrote one small thing beneath the empty line, just to see if it looked right in ink. Keep the shop open through the storm. Let people in. Listen. Lightning winked like a friend too far away to hug. Thunder agreed. The rain went on saying what it always says in every language it has: stay, stay. There is room, Maya hummed once under her breath. A childhood habit the shop remembered by turning itself a little warmer. Then she blew out 2 candles and left one burning by the bell, because some nights deserve a lighthouse of their own. The storm deepened overnight, pulling the sea closer to the town, as if Greyhaven were something it wanted to hold. The lighthouse beam swept its careful circles, drawing thin silver lines through the rain. In the quiet between lightning and thunder, the air felt charged with something more than weather, like waiting for a confession you didn't know you'd already written. Maya barely slept. The red ledger lay open on the counter downstairs. The candle beside it reduced to a tide pool of wax. The bell waited in its wooden box like a heart that knew when to beat. She curled under a quilt on the old sofa, listening to the rain's conversations with the roof, half dreaming of her grandmother's handwriting and the blue slips of paper that led her here. At 4:05, the bell chimed. Just once, softly, like the sound of someone clearing their throat in a library. Maya sat up so fast the quilt slid to the floor. No wind had touched the door. No hand reached for the pull. The bell had decided on its own. She crossed the rug barefoot, the boards beneath her feet cool and faintly swollen from the damp. Outside, lightning stitched the horizon in silver thread. She touched the bell, its metal humming faintly with the residue of sound. The radio clicked on across the street. "Good morning, Greyhaven," Elias' voice said, soft as warm tea. "Or good still night, if you're the kind of person who hasn't closed their eyes yet. We've got a new bundle, and a kettle stubbornly insisting it knows what's best. If you're listening, you're exactly where you need to be." He read the first letter, a child's note, scrawled on the back of an envelope. "Please tell the storm to bring MY-Cat back." His chuckle carried across the rain, and somehow it was impossible not to smile with him. Then another, on thick parchment, I forgave you yesterday, though you didn't ask me to. And another, short as a breath. If you're still awake, so am I. Maya leaned against the counter, the steam of her untouched tea softening her face. The bell still trembled faintly. It was as if the town itself was exhaling into these notes, trusting the rain to keep what needed keeping and deliver what needed saying. She took her grandmother's blue slip and turned it over again, tracing the faded line. He will come with the light when the storm turns. The storm hadn't turned yet, but the beam swept by like a heartbeat she could count. By 4:30, Elias paused. "We've got one more," he said quietly. "This one's different." She could hear him unfolding the paper, the soft rasp like waves sliding off rock. "It's dated," he said, "almost 2 years back. But there's no name, just this. If the bell rings on a westward storm, open the window and let the rain in. You'll know why." Maya's gaze snapped to the bell. The storm had gone west last night. The bell had rung itself awake minutes ago. The shop smelled of damp paper, old ink, and a secret about to become unsecret. She moved to the back room, candle in hand. The listening wall waited in its neat constellation of threads and pins, every note a small orbit of meaning. At the very top, behind a yellowing page of poetry, something glimmered faintly in the candlelight. It was an envelope sealed with blue wax. "For Maya," said the front. Her breath fogged in the cooler air as she broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. Her grandmother's handwriting, steady as ever, stretched across it like it had been written yesterday. "When the bell chooses you, it means the town is ready to tell its next story. But this one begins with you, Maya. It begins with the window and the rain." She hesitated, glancing toward the small casement window above the old desk. The rain blurred the glass, making the street outside look like something painted in watercolor. Heart pounding, she unlatched it. Cold air rushed in, heavy with petrichor and salt. The rain misted her face, dotted the letter, drummed the wooden sill. And beneath the rain, faint but real, a sound answered back, the soft chime of another bell. It came from the lighthouse. The second bell sounded again, soft, deliberate, carried across the wet air like a breath you weren't meant to hear. Maya leaned out the casement window, candlelight trembling against the rain. The town was blurred into a wash of slate roofs and running gutters. But beyond it, on the dark hill above the harbor, the lighthouse stood like the spine of some old sleeping creature. Its beam cut slow circles through the storm, and beneath that white, patient turning, she saw it. A warm glimmer behind one of the upper windows, where no light usually burned. Another chime, fainter this time, but certain. The lighthouse was calling her. Maya closed the window, wiped the rain from her face, and glanced down at the letter in her hand. When the bell chooses you, it means the town is ready to tell its next story. Ready or not, it had begun. She crossed the shop quickly, stuffing the blue letter into her coat pocket, pulling the hood up as she stepped out into the wet dark. The street lamps hummed softly, halos of gold in the deep gray downpour. The sound of the rain was heavier now, not just falling, but leaning, as if the sky had decided to press its weight into the earth. Lightning glanced across the harbor, turning the water into wrinkled silver. Maya walked fast, the bell's faint echo still in her chest. Past the cafe, its windows fogged with the breath of early risers. Past the boarded shutters of the bakery, where the smell of storm bread would greet the morning. The streets were empty, except for puddles that swallowed streetlight and gave nothing back. By the time she reached the foot of the hill, her shoes were soaked through, but the climb warmed her blood. The lighthouse rose higher with each step, a pale column veined with rainwater, its great beam sweeping out to sea. At the door, she hesitated only a moment before knocking. The door opened almost immediately. Elias stood there in worn boots and a wool sweater, hair damp and curling at his temples. The beam from above brushed the edges of his face, making his eyes catch pale green in the light. "You heard it," he said simply. Maya nodded. "It called me." He stepped aside, letting her in. The inside of the lighthouse was warmer than she expected, filled with the faint hum of machinery and the resinous smell of old wood and salt air. A spiral staircase wound upward around the hollow core, its metal steps slick where rain had followed him down earlier. On a wooden table near the door lay an object she had never seen before, another bell nearly twin to hers, though the metal was brighter, and the handle bound in a cord of deep green rather than blue. "You have one," she said. "I've had it for years," Elias replied, his voice low, almost reverent. "Your grandmother gave it to me, said I'd know when to ring it. Said when my bell answers yours, it means the story she started isn't finished yet." Maya ran her fingers across the bronze edge, tracing the faint grooves where time had rubbed the metal smooth. "What story?" He shook his head, pulling a folded envelope from a drawer and laying it gently on the table. Its paper was the same sea blue as hers, sealed with the same wax. Across the front, for the LIGHTKEPER and the listener. "She left this with me," Elias said. "Said I wasn't to open it until I heard your bell. I've been waiting 2 years." The rain struck harder against the lighthouse windows, as if urging them forward. "Then we open it now," Maya said. Elias hesitated only a moment, then broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet written in her grandmother's confident looping hand. The ink, though faded, was steady. To Maya and Elias, when the westward storm returns, there are letters hidden beneath the light. They belong to the ones who came before you, and the ones who never came back. Find them, read them aloud, and the rest will find its way. Beneath the words was a rough map of the lighthouse's upper level, a small circle drawn near the highest landing, listening room. Elias frowned. "There's no listening room," he said, shaking his head. "I've lived here 6 years. That landing's empty." "Then maybe," Maya said softly, "it isn't empty anymore. They climbed together, their footsteps ringing against the narrow spiral. The air grew cooler as they ascended, the sound of rain louder near the top. Each sweep of the lighthouse beam lit their faces for a moment, then left them in shadow again, as if the storm itself wanted to watch. At the final landing, they found a small wooden hatch set low against the wall, nearly hidden beneath layers of paint. It wasn't on any blueprint Elias had seen. The map had been right. The hatch groaned when Elias pried it open, revealing a narrow crawl space lined with cedar boards. Inside, bundles of wax-sealed envelopes rested in a wooden crate, each one tied with thread faded by time. Some were damp at the corners, edges softened by decades of storms, but most were intact. Maya lifted the first envelope, tracing the writing with cautious fingers. The script was unfamiliar, older, flowing like currents of water. "This isn't my grandmother's hand," she whispered. "This is older." Elias leaned closer, scanning the date on the back. 1912, he said quietly. "These letters are over a century old." Thunder rolled above them, deep enough to rattle the glass. Maya carefully untied the thread. Inside was a page so fragile it felt like a breath might tear it. And then she read aloud. "If you have found this, it means the rain has carried our voices far enough. We are waiting where the water meets the light. Follow the bells." Her voice trembled into silence. Elias met her eyes. "Your grandmother knew about this." Maya nodded, heart racing. "She wanted us to find them." Somewhere below, the second bell rang again, soft, sure, calling them deeper into the storm's secret. The second bell faded into silence, but the sound of it seemed to stay suspended in the air, woven into the patter of rain against the lighthouse glass. Maya stood with the old letter in her hands, the ink still trembling faintly from where her voice had touched it. Elias crouched beside the crate of envelopes, running his fingers over the edges, as though each carried heat, history, and something more than memory. The listening room was no bigger than a cupboard, but it felt larger on the inside, as if the cedar walls had learned to hold more than their size allowed. The air was thick, with the scent of old wood, salt, and faint traces of ink that had slept 100 years in silence. Lightning flashed against the glass above, turning the tiny room briefly to silver. Elias lifted one of the older envelopes. Its wax seal cracked and faded nearly white with age. "These aren't just letters," he said softly. "They're messages left for someone who hasn't arrived yet." "Us," Maya whispered, her thumb brushing the seal of another envelope. "Whoever wrote these was waiting for us." He turned his letter over in his hands, brow furrowing. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "they were waiting for the bell." Maya opened the second envelope carefully, the paper so thin it felt more like silk than parchment. Inside was a single sentence, written in a hand she didn't recognize. "When the two bells ring together, the tide will turn, and the path will open." Her heart skipped. "The path," she murmured, glancing instinctively toward the window where the lighthouse beam swept across the blackened sea. "Do you think I think Elias said. Your grandmother knew exactly what we'd find up here. He retrieved his bell from the table and placed it beside hers on the crate. One bound in blue cord, the other in green. Nearly identical, Maya touched hers gently, feeling the smooth grooves worn by decades of hands. 2 bells, she said softly. 1 voice. Elias nodded. And a path. The rain strengthened again, pounding against the glass in thick silver ropes, and the thunder answered from somewhere deep beyond the horizon. For a moment, the entire lighthouse seemed to hum, as though the storm itself was tuned to the same note as the bells resting between them. Maya felt her chest tighten, but it wasn't fear, it was the weight of inevitability, the sense of standing on the edge of something larger than herself. Listen, Elias said suddenly. She tilted her head, straining past the restless hiss of rain. Somewhere beneath it, a deep, slow rhythm, like a heartbeat amplified by the sea. Not thunder, not waves. What is that? She whispered. Elias crossed the room to a narrow window and peered into the storm. The lighthouse beam cut across the harbor, where the dark water shifted restlessly, waves climbing and breaking over each other. It's the tide, he murmured. But it's wrong. It's rising too fast. Maya joined him, pressing her hand to the glass. Below, the water swirled in wide spirals, moving not toward the shore, but away from it, as though something in the deep was pulling it down. She glanced at the letters in the crate, her pulse matching the strange rhythm beneath the storm. Elias, she said carefully, I think the tide's what the letters meant. He nodded slowly, his sea glass eyes reflecting the glow of the beam. If the bells open the path, maybe it's tied to the water. He hesitated, looking at her as if choosing the next words carefully. But paths open both ways, Maya. That means something's coming back. Her hand tightened on the edge of the crate. Back from where? Before he could answer, the bell on the table rang. Neither of them had touched it. The sound was soft, round, and patient, but this time, both bells vibrated together, the blue cord and the green cord, harmonizing on a single note that seemed to soak into the air. Lightning cracked outside, striking somewhere near the harbor with a blinding flare, and the entire lighthouse shuddered beneath their feet. Maya stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the desk. The path, she whispered, breathless. It's opening. Elias' voice was quiet, steady, but threaded with awe. Then we follow it. They descended the spiral staircase, the hum of the bells still following them like a thread of sound they couldn't shake. At the base of the lighthouse, the wind shoved against the door hard enough that Elias had to brace his shoulder to push it open. The storm hit them like a living thing, cold rain slicing across their faces, soaking through coats and sweaters in seconds. The harbor stretched below them, restless and wild. The tide had shifted unnaturally, retreating into the distance as though pulled by invisible hands. And there, where the lighthouse beam reached farthest into the Black Sea, something glimmered beneath the waves, a pale line etched across the water, faint but sharp, like moonlight caught on glass. A path. Maya clutched the blue letter instructions in her coat pocket. Her grandmother's words returned with sudden, quiet clarity. Follow the bells. She looked at Elias, the rain beating on his lashes, and he met her gaze without needing to ask the question. Together, they stepped into the storm. The rain was relentless now, coming down in silver curtains so heavy that the harbor lights blurred into halos. Thunder rolled deep and low, like a sleeping giant stirring beneath the earth, and lightning split the clouds in wide, blinding veins. Maya and Elias stood at the edge of the cliff, where the lighthouse road met the sea, the bells in their hands humming faintly, with a vibration that matched neither the wind nor the waves. But something older, deeper, hidden beneath both. The strange line of pale light stretched across the black water, distant yet vivid. A narrow band of shifting silver that shimmered where no reflection should be. It pulsed faintly with each sweep of the lighthouse beam, as though responding to the rhythm of the bells themselves. "This isn't a path," Maya said softly, breathless. "It's an opening." Elias glanced down at the green-corded bell in his hand. Its bronze surface trembled like something alive, like a heart pressed against his palm. An opening to what? Maya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her grandmother's last note. The damp paper stuck briefly to her fingers, the ink smudged but legible. "When the two bells ring together, follow where the rain leads." She looked up, the drops slicking her lashes, and noticed something strange. Though the rain fell heavy everywhere else, the silver band across the water seemed untouched, as though the storm refused to cross it. "That's where we go," she said, pointing. There. They followed the old stone steps leading down from the cliffside to the harbor, their boots splashing through rising puddles where seawater had already started to spill over the docks. The tide had pulled so far back that fishing boats rested awkwardly against the pier, creaking like old bones. At the end of the dock, Elias paused, scanning the horizon. The storm blurred everything beyond a few dozen meters, but the faint silver glow cut through the chaos like a hidden road carved into the sea. Grey Havens always had stories about this, Elias said, his voice raised above the wind. A path the rain draws only when the westward storm returns. My grandfather used to swear he saw it once, when he was a boy. No one believed him. Maya glanced at him. "Did your grandmother keep a bell, too?" He nodded slowly, his sea-glass eyes glinting under the lighthouse beam. "Every lightkeeper has one, but no one's ever seen two bells answer each other before. Until tonight," she whispered. The bells rang again. Neither of them had moved their hands, yet the sound rose between them, soft but undeniable, a perfect harmony that merged with the rain. The note stretched outward across the harbor, and as it did, the silver band on the water began to widen. Maya gripped Elias' wrist, breath-catching. "It's opening." The shimmer became a thin, steady glow, stretching from the edge of the dock out into the black expanse of the sea. The surface stilled along the line, the waves pulling aside as though the storm itself obeyed the sound. Elias looked at her, the rain dripping from his jawline, hair plastered to his forehead. "If we step onto that," he said, "there's no going back until it's finished." "Then we finish it," Maya replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They stepped forward together. The first moment was terrifying. The dock ended, and their boots should have plunged into cold, endless water. But the surface beneath their feet held solid, firm yet alive, as though walking on the stretched skin of the sea itself. Beneath the silver glow, the water churned restlessly, shadows darting far below, but the path remained unmoving. The bells hummed louder, their tones vibrating through their bones now, syncing with the thunder, until Maya could no longer tell where her heartbeat ended and the storm began. Halfway across, Elias slowed, lifting his gaze toward the horizon. "Look," he said softly. Maya followed his line of sight. Far ahead, where the silver path vanished into the black mist, a faint glow pulsed beneath the water. It was soft, deep, rhythmic, like the beating heart of the ocean itself. "That's where the letters wanted us to go," she murmured. Elias nodded. "The ones who came before us, they were trying to reach it." The rain softened slightly as they walked, as though the storm itself bent inward to listen. The lighthouse beam swept across their backs one final time before its reach fell short, leaving them in the dark vastness of the sea, guided only by the faint silver thread beneath their boots. Maya glanced at Elias, noticing the way the wind pushed damp strands of hair against his forehead, the way his jaw tightened each time the thunder rolled, the way he carried his bell like something precious rather than powerful. "You're not scared," she said softly. He glanced at her, surprised by the statement. "I am," he admitted, "but the fear feels right." Maya nodded, understanding more than she could explain. The hum of the bells resonated between them like a quiet promise. Then the sound changed. A new note rose beneath the harmony, deep and resonant, carried upward from beneath the waves. Maya stopped, gripping Elias' sleeve. From below the path, shapes moved, faint silhouettes gliding through the glowing water, vast and slow. She caught her breath, unable to speak. "They're not fish," Elias said quietly. "No," she whispered. "They're bells, dozens of them, massive bronze bells half buried in the sand beneath the waves, their surfaces carved with symbols neither of them recognized, each one ringing softly in answer to the ones they carried." "The letters," Maya breathed, awe threading her voice. "They're leading us to whatever this is." Elias met her gaze, rain shining like stars on his lashes. "Then we keep going." Far ahead, the glow beneath the sea grew brighter, spreading outward in ripples of pale light, illuminating the storm-churned darkness. The bells in their hands began to hum louder, pulling them forward. Maya exhaled, her pulse pounding in her ears. She glanced once at Elias, his profile caught in a brief flash of lightning, and thought, not for the first time, that her grandmother had known exactly what she was doing when she left those letters behind. Something waited ahead, something bigger than both of them. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, Maya realized she wasn't just following the path. She was following him. The silver path stretched endlessly ahead, glowing faintly beneath the black waves, as if the ocean itself carried a memory carved into its depths. Rain lashed against Maya's hood, soaking her hair, but she barely felt it anymore. The bells in their hands were warm now, vibrating like living things, calling out across the storm with a low, endless hum. The deeper they walked, the quieter the sea seemed to become, as though the storm respected this hidden place. The waves rolled softly to either side, breaking around the invisible boundaries of the path without touching it. Thunder still growled in the distance, but here, in the center of the restless water, the sound faded into something slower, steadier, a rhythm older than weather. Beneath them, the enormous submerged bells rang faintly, their notes carrying upward in waves of resonance that shook the air itself. Maya slowed, peering down through the shifting silver beneath her boots. "Look," she whispered. Elias leaned closer, following her gaze. Below the surface, beyond the scattered bells, something vast glimmered faintly in the deep. It wasn't the shifting of light on water. It was structured, deliberate, the faint outline of arches, towering columns, and worn stone rising from the ocean floor like the skeleton of an ancient cathedral. Elias drew in a slow, steady breath. "There's a city down there." They walked in silence for a while, the path carrying them farther from Greyhaven, until the lighthouse beam no longer reached them. Only the glow beneath their feet and the distant pulse of the submerged bells guided them forward. At last, the silver path widened, opening into a circle suspended above the deep. The water here was calmer, though the air trembled faintly with some unseen energy. In the center of the glowing platform stood a stone pedestal, half swallowed by salt and time. On it rested a single object, a third bell. This one was unlike theirs, larger, its bronze etched with symbols worn smooth by centuries of storms. A cord of deep crimson bound its handle, faded but unbroken. Maya's breath caught. This, it was waiting. Elias stepped forward carefully, his boots splashing shallow puddles collected on the smooth stone. "This bell isn't like ours," he said softly. "This one's older." Maya approached, fingertips brushing the damp metal. The surface was cold, but beneath the cold was something else, a slow vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat captured in bronze. As her hand closed around the handle, the humming of her blue-corded bell ceased. Elias' bell fell silent too. The storm itself seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then the crimson bell rang. The sound wasn't like anything she had ever heard. It wasn't loud, but it was infinite, a single note layered with 1,000 hidden harmonies, vibrating through skin and bone and memory alike. The silver path beneath their feet rippled outward, as though the sea itself bowed to the sound. Elias grabbed her hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. All around them, the submerged bells below the surface answered, one by one, deep voices rising like a choir that had waited centuries for someone to begin the song. The arches of the drowned city glimmered faintly as the light from below intensified, revealing more details with every passing moment. Statues tangled in coral, mosaics coated in drifting sand, roads carved in spirals that led toward some hidden center. Maya couldn't breathe for a moment, overwhelmed by the sheer immensity of it. "What is this place?" "I don't know," Elias murmured, his voice tight with awe. "But your grandmother, she must have known." "She wanted us to find it," Maya said, gripping the crimson bell tighter. "Everything, the letters, the lighthouse, the instructions. This is what she was guiding us toward." Then something changed in the hum. A deeper, slower note rose from beneath the waves. Unlike any of the bells, it was softer, older, and it came from somewhere far below the city itself. The glowing water rippled in time with it, and the silver path shivered faintly under their boots. Elias glanced at her, eyes sharp now. "That's not a bell," Maya swallowed. "Then what is it?" "I don't know," he said, lowering his voice instinctively. "But it feels alive." As if in answer, a soft vibration rolled beneath their feet, traveling through the path and into their bones. The submerged bells quieted, their voices fading into silence, one by one, leaving only the deep, ancient note pulsing below. Maya stepped closer to the edge, peering down into the glow. Shadows shifted at impossible depths, vast, slow-moving forms stirring among the drowned arches. And then she saw it. A single, enormous shape beneath the city, larger than any structure, its surface faintly luminous, pulsing with the same rhythm as the deep note. It lay coiled beneath the ruins, as if sleeping. The crimson bell rang softly in her hand, unbidden. The shape stirred. "Maya," Elias whispered, his grip tightening around her wrist. "We need to leave." She shook her head, unable to look away. "No," she breathed. "This is why she sent us here. Whatever's down there, it's connected to Greyhaven, to the storms, to everything." The deep note grew louder, rolling upward through the sea like a heartbeat waking from a long, dreamless sleep. The silver path beneath them vibrated violently now, forcing them to steady their footing. Suddenly, a column of pale light burst upward from the city below, wrapping the pedestal in its glow. The crimson bell sang louder, joining the ancient note in a harmony that felt like standing inside the center of a storm. Maya clutched Elias' hand. "I think it's waking up." He turned to her, wet hair plastered to his forehead, sea glass eyes wide and searching. "Then we'd better decide fast," he said, his voice steady despite the thunder building beneath them. "Do we run or follow it?" Maya finished, her voice trembling. The storm seemed to pause, waiting for their choice. The silver path beneath their feet vibrated like a living thread, pulsing in time with the deep note rising from below. The ancient sound rolled through the water and into their bones, shaking something loose inside them both, a memory they didn't know they had. The storm above roared and cracked, but here, at the heart of the path, It was the sea that spoke. Maya gripped the crimson bell tightly, her knuckles pale against the wet bronze. The hum inside it was no longer soft, but insistent, pulling her gaze down toward the glowing ruins beneath the waves. The submerged city shimmered faintly through the stormlit water, its wide arches and broken towers tangled with drifting vines of sea grass and coral. Statues leaned half swallowed by sand, their stone faces weathered smooth by centuries. Elias stood beside her, drenched and breathless, the green-corded bell clutched loosely in his hand. His sea-glass eyes reflected the pale glow below. "We shouldn't be standing here," he said softly, almost apologetically, as though confessing a thought he didn't want to believe. "Every part of me says this isn't safe." "Then why aren't you moving?" Maya asked, her voice quiet but steady. He glanced at her, rain dripping from his jaw, and offered the smallest, strangest smile. "Because the rest of me wants to know what's waiting down there." The deep note rose again, lower this time, layered with harmonics that brushed along their ribs like fingers across strings. The submerged bells beneath the water began to answer it softly, their voices building one by one into a trembling, resonant chord. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the sound in her skin rather than hearing it. The letters, the lighthouse, the bells. It was all connected, threads woven into something much older than the town above. Her grandmother must have known. "Elias," she murmured, "what if the bells aren't just calling us?" He frowned slightly. "Then what are they doing?" She opened her eyes slowly, the glow from below painting her face silver. What if they're waking something up? The water beneath the glowing path began to shift. At first, Maya thought it was the storm's reflection, ripples of lightning bending across the waves. But then she saw the shapes moving below, vast and deliberate. Pillars of stone that she thought were broken towers, tilted, turned. They weren't towers at all. They were gates. The entire drowned city began to stir, as if an ancient breath moved through its bones. Tiny creatures scattered into the shifting currents as the structures beneath them reoriented, aligning in spiraling patterns that stretched outward from the center of the ruins. The glowing platform beneath Maya and Elias vibrated harder now, trembling with energy that felt alive. Elias stepped closer to the edge, his breath catching. "Do you see that?" At the center of the spiral stood a massive structure carved from pale stone, its dome cracked and tangled with kelp. Around it, 7 colossal bells hung on curved arches rising from the ocean floor, each etched with spiraling markings. Maya whispered the words before she even knew she had them. "The 7 guardians." Elias glanced back at her. "You know them?" She shook her head quickly, water dripping from her hood. "No, but I've seen them." "Where?" "In dreams," she said softly, barely audible above the storm. "For weeks before I came home, I dreamed of bells underwater. I thought it was just grief." Elias studied her for a moment, then turned back toward the city. "Maybe grief knows things we don't," he murmured. The crimson bell in Maya's hand suddenly rang sharp and clear, without her touching it. The sound was immediately echoed by the 7 massive bells below, their deep voices shaking the sea and sky alike. The silver path shuddered violently, sending ripples of pale light cascading outward, and then, impossibly, the water between them and the ruins began to fall away. It drained not downward, but outward, pulled along invisible channels carved into the ocean floor. The glowing platform beneath them descended smoothly, as though carried by unseen hands, lowering them toward the drowned city on a column of shimmering light. Maya gasped, grabbing Elia's arm as the sea peeled back around them, revealing ancient mosaics and forgotten streets, once lost to salt and time. The air filled with the low hum of the bells, vibrating in their teeth, in their hearts, in their very blood. Elias held her hand tightly now, grounding them both against the vertigo of the impossible. This shouldn't exist. But it does, Maya whispered, her voice trembling with awe. They landed gently at the base of the spiral streets, ankle deep in clear water that glowed faintly with pale luminescence. The drowned city spread out around them like a memory of a civilization that had learned how to speak to storms and seas. The 7 colossal bells stood silent now, but their weight filled the air with presence. Each one was carved with spiraling symbols, looping around its bronze curves like language braided into song. Maya approached the nearest bell cautiously, running her fingers along the carved markings. The surface was cold, smooth, and wet, yet she felt something beneath it, like faint heat trapped under stone. As her hand touched the central symbol, a line of glowing script rippled outward, crawling along the bell's surface like fire running across oil. The other 6 bells responded instantly, flaring with the same pale light, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. Maya, Elias said sharply, stepping closer. What did you do? I didn't do anything, she breathed, her hand still resting on the warm metal. I just listened. The bells tolled as one. The deep, resonant sound burst through the city, spiraling up into the storm above. The glow beneath their feet surged outward, filling the entire ruin with light. And then the sea, the bells, the air, all of it went still. In the silence that followed, a faint whisper rose, layered and soft, as if hundreds of voices were speaking at once through the echoes of time itself. The storm remembers. Maya staggered back, pulling her hand away, her pulse thundering. Elias caught her, steadying her with both hands. His face was close now, rain dripping from his jawline onto her cheek. What does it mean? He whispered. She met his gaze, breath uneven, heart pounding in rhythm with the silent bells. I think, she said softly, we just woke up the past. The silence was deafening. The 7 colossal bells stood glowing faintly, their carved markings alive with soft threads of pale light. The entire drowned city seemed to hum beneath the stillness, as though holding its breath alongside the storm above. Even the rain had softened, falling in delicate threads instead of sheets, as if the sky itself was listening. Elia's hand remained on Maya's arm, grounding her against the impossible weight of what they had just awakened. The warmth of his grip steadied her, but her heart raced in rhythm, with the faint vibrations rolling through the stone beneath their boots. The whisper came again, stronger this time, layered with voices of every age and tone, men and women, children and elders, hundreds of voices braided together into one living memory. The storm remembers. Maya turned slowly toward the bells. "They're speaking," she whispered, almost afraid of her own words. Elias stepped closer to the nearest bell, his fingertips hovering above the glowing spiral markings. "Not to us," he murmured. "Through us." A sudden breeze swept across the ruined streets, carrying the salt of forgotten centuries and the faintest traces of something sweeter, like crushed jasmine beneath water. The mosaics along the spiral path began to shimmer faintly, colors returning to stones that had lain drowned for hundreds of years. The whispers threaded together, coalescing into words shaped by the harmony of bells and storm. We were the first to listen. Maya froze, breath catching in her throat. "Elias, it's telling a story." He nodded, sea-glass eyes locked on the nearest bell. "Then we listen." The light spilling from the carvings swirled and rose into the air, shaping itself into images, fragments of a long-forgotten world, suspended above the drowned city like a living memory. A bustling harbor beneath perpetual rain. Towers carved from coral and stone, spiraling upward like seashells kissed by lightning. People gathered on bridges of glass that arched across silver waters, each one carrying a small bronze bell bound in colored cord. "They were like us," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "We were called Lithari," the voices said as one, ancient yet clear. "Keepers of the tides, listeners of storms." Our bells spoke to the ocean, and the ocean answered. Through them, we called the rains, guided the waves, and shaped the paths beneath the sea. Elias' fingers tightened around the green-corded bell he carried. "This entire city," he said softly. "They built it on sound." The images shifted. The shining Lithari towers trembled, shadows swelling behind them like an oncoming tide. Vast storm fronts rolled across the horizon, lightning carving deep veins into the clouds. But this storm was different. Its center glimmered unnaturally, like a living void. "The deep one woke," the voices whispered, "not born of us, nor bound by the bells." Its song was older, its hunger endless. A ripple of cold slid down Maya's spine as she clutched the crimson bell tighter. "The thing beneath us," she breathed, "the one under the city." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the image of the writhing shadow unfurling beneath the waves. "It destroyed them. It slept when we silenced the bells." The voices continued, growing softer, more fragmented, as though fading with memory itself. "But the sea remembers, the storm remembers, and when the bells awaken, so shall it." The vision dissolved like ink dispersing in water. The glowing mosaics dimmed, leaving the drowned city in a soft, uneasy hush. Maya turned toward Elias, her voice unsteady. We woke it. He shook his head, rain dripping from his lashes. No, he said quietly. The bells woke it. We just listened. She took a deep breath, clutching the crimson bell close to her chest. Then we have to silence them again. Elias frowned, glancing at the 7 great bells towering above them. How? Look at the size of them, Maya. Whatever the Lithari used to seal this thing away, it wasn't brute force. She hesitated, staring down at the spirals etched into the bronze beneath her palm. No, she said softly. It was sound. Before Elias could respond, the deep note returned. Low, trembling, alive. It rolled upward from beneath the ruins, vibrating through the streets, shaking droplets loose from ancient stone. The silver water around the city rippled violently, glowing brighter with every passing second. Then the first colossal bell tolled. The sound was deafening, crashing through the city like a wave of thunder. One by one, the others followed, answering the deep note with voices that shook the very bones of the sea. Elias grabbed Maya's hand instinctively. It's calling them, he shouted above the roar. The bells, whatever's beneath us, it's waking up now. Lightning split the sky above, striking somewhere far out across the open sea. The wind screamed between the broken arches, carrying the taste of salt and electricity. The drowned city trembled beneath their feet, small fragments of stone cracking and falling into the glowing shallows below. Maya turned toward the spiral path leading deeper into the ruins, her pulse racing. The letters said the answers are here, she shouted, gripping his arm. If my grandmother knew about this, then she must have left something to stop it. Elias hesitated for only a heartbeat before nodding. Then we find it. The 2 of them ran, splashing through ankle-deep water, their bells still vibrating wildly in their hands. Around them, the drowned city came alive, ancient lights reawakening in long-forgotten windows, glyphs along the stone walls flaring faintly as the harmonies grew louder. And behind it all, beneath the tolling bells and the storm's endless breath, the deep note continued to rise. Steady, patient, hungry, the drowned city trembled around them. Each toll of the 7 colossal bells sending ripples through the glowing shallows. The storm above roared with wild, electric fury. But down here, beneath the surface and the weight of time, Maya felt as though they were moving inside a heartbeat, steady, immense, alive. Elias ran just ahead, water splashing around his boots as they followed the spiral path deeper into the ruins. Faint lights flickered within broken arches, old glyphs pulsing dimly along walls carved centuries ago. The vibrations of the bells thrummed through her chest and bones, almost in rhythm with her racing pulse. Where are we going? Elias shouted above the distant thunder and the endless tolling. To the center, Maya called back, gripping the crimson bell tight. The letters said the answers are here, the heart of the city. They turned a corner and entered a narrow passageway carved beneath an enormous arch, where moss and coral clung to damp stone. Symbols covered every surface, spiraling into patterns that seemed to shift if she stared too long. The faint glow of their bells reflected across the markings, and for an instant, she swore the walls themselves were breathing. Elias slowed, lifting his green-corded bell slightly. Its vibration intensified, resonating with something nearby. He nodded toward a massive, sealed doorway ahead. "There," he said, voice hushed despite the roar behind them. "It's inside." The door was carved from pale stone, slick with centuries of salt water, its surface etched with the same spirals they'd seen on the bells above. In its center, 3 shallow hollows had been carved, one lined with blue, one green, one crimson. Maya's breath caught. The bells. Elias nodded, reaching for his. Together, they set the 3 bells into place, the soft hum in their hands fading as the vibrations sank into the stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door inhaled. Stone shifted like muscle beneath skin. A soft rush of air swept past them, carrying the faintest traces of old rain and something sweet, like pressed petals preserved in glass. Slowly, silently, the doorway parted, revealing a spiral staircase descending into blackness. At the threshold, Elias hesitated. "Once we go down," he said, his sea-glass eyes fixed on hers, "we might not get back up." Maya swallowed hard, feeling the heat of the crimson bell's echo still thrumming faintly through her fingertips. "If my grandmother left something here," she said quietly, "then we have to follow it." The stairs wound down into silence. The further they descended, the quieter the storm became, until even the tolling of the 7 colossal bells above faded to a faint, ghostly hum. The air grew warmer, thick with the smell of salt and earth, and something faintly metallic, like rain on stone. When they reached the bottom, the staircase opened into a vast, circular chamber lit by soft blue fire dancing along the walls. The flames burned without smoke, reflecting in the shallow pools scattered across the floor like fragments of fallen stars. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal carved from deep obsidian, its surface polished smooth. Upon it rested a small, weathered chest bound in silver bands etched with unfamiliar runes. The metal faintly pulsed with each vibration of the distant bells. Maya approached slowly, heart hammering in her ears. The moment her fingers touched the chest, the blue fires flared brighter. She opened it. Inside lay a single folded sheet of sea blue paper, untouched by time or water. Her grandmother's handwriting curved across it in perfect, deliberate strokes. "Maya, if you've come this far, you've heard them, the bells, the storm, the voices of the Lithari. What sleeps beneath the city must never awaken. The bells were made to bind it, not summon it. But the ritual is broken, and only 2 listeners can restore it." Maya's throat tightened. She read the next lines aloud, her voice trembling. "Find the heart of the tide. Speak its name. Bind it with one voice." Elias stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "One voice," he repeated softly. She turned to him slowly. 2 bells, she said, her fingers tightening on the crimson bell, but one voice. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, nearly throwing them both off balance. The chamber walls trembled, ancient stones grinding against one another. From somewhere far above, a deafening roar rolled through the ruins, a sound deeper than thunder, older than storms, the deep note. It was awake. Elias grabbed her arm, pulling her close to keep her steady. "We don't have much time," he said sharply. "Whatever your grandmother wanted us to do, it has to happen now." Maya nodded, forcing herself to breathe steadily despite the pounding of her heart. "The heart of the tide," she whispered. "It has to be somewhere below us." As if in answer, the blue flames along the walls flickered violently, their light bending toward a narrow tunnel at the far end of the chamber. A soft, rhythmic glow pulsed from within, syncing perfectly with the deep note rising through the stones. Elias met her gaze. "That's it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear beneath it. "That's where we go." Maya hesitated only a moment, then reached for his hand. Their fingers locked together, warm and damp, grounding them both. "Together," she said. "Always," he answered. And without looking back, they stepped into the tunnel. The tunnel sloped downward sharply, carved from smooth black stone that glittered faintly in the dim glow ahead. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop ringing softly as it fell into narrow grooves along the floor. The sound strangely melodic, as though even the earth itself had been shaped to carry music. Maya's boots splashed through shallow pools as she held tightly to Elias' hand. The vibrations from the bells above followed them like a distant pulse. But here, beneath the city's drowned foundations, another rhythm had taken over, a deeper, slower thrum, rising through the stone as though they were walking along the veins of a living creature. "That sound," Elias murmured, his voice low as if afraid to disturb it. "It's coming from below us." Maya nodded, her breath uneven. "The heart of the tide," she whispered. "It has to be close." The soft blue glow intensified with every step, spilling through the cracks ahead, until the narrow tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern. It was like stepping into the lungs of the sea. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling lost in darkness, supported by towering stone columns that curved upward like the ribs of some ancient beast. Shallow water stretched across the floor, glowing faintly from veins of pale luminescence, running beneath it like starlight trapped under glass. And there, at the center of it all, stood the heart. It wasn't stone or metal, but something older, smooth, translucent, and alive, with shifting light, as though the ocean itself had condensed into a single, breathing shape. It floated just above the glowing water, suspended by invisible forces, pulsing slowly in time with the deep note that had followed them since the path first appeared. Maya's breath caught in her throat. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias tightened his grip on her hand, his sea glass eyes reflecting the heart's glow. "It's also dangerous," he said softly. "That thing It's holding something back. They stepped into the water, sending ripples across the glowing surface. The closer they drew to the heart, the louder the bells above became, not tolling now, but resonating, their sound aligning perfectly with the slow pulse of the deep note. Maya pulled the crimson bell from her coat and held it close. The hum inside it was stronger now, vibrating so intensely it made her fingertips numb. Elias lifted his green-corded bell, and together they felt the strange synchrony between them, as though their bells were speaking in a language they had yet to understand. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear pressing against her ribs. "This is what my grandmother meant. We have to bind it again." Elias nodded, though his jaw was tense. "One voice," he murmured. "But how?" Before Maya could answer, the heart flared. A surge of light burst outward, blinding them for a moment. The water beneath their feet swirled violently, glowing brighter until they could see movement beneath its surface, shadows shifting like enormous wings, unfolding in the deep. And then the whispers returned. 2 listeners, 1 voice, 1 choice. Maya froze, heart hammering. The words came not from the air, but from inside her mind, reverberating in the deepest part of her memory. Elias turned sharply toward her. "Did you hear that?" She nodded slowly. "I think the heart is speaking to us." The whispers grew louder, forming fragments of meaning layered over the endless hum. "We bound the deep one once before. 7 bells, 7 voices. The storm obeyed us, but the sea remembers." Images flickered through Maya's mind, brief, haunting flashes of the Lithari, their translucent towers gleaming beneath endless rain, each holding a bell of their own, 7 voices raised in harmony, one song binding the heart and sealing something vast and terrible beneath it. "But there are only 2 of us," Elias said hoarsely. The whispers answered, 2 listeners, 1 voice. Maya exhaled shakily, staring at her crimson bell. "It wants us to merge them," she said softly. 2 bells, 1 sound, 1 voice to seal it again. Elias frowned. "And if we fail," the whispers shifted, almost sad. "Then the deep one wakes, and Greyhaven drowns." Suddenly, the entire chamber shuddered violently. A deep, guttural roar echoed from beneath the heart, rattling the water and shaking loose fragments of stone from the ceiling. The luminescent veins below flared wildly as massive shadows twisted and coiled in the depths beneath their feet. "It's waking up," Elias said, gripping her shoulder. "We're out of time." Maya nodded, holding her bell tightly. "Then we start the ritual." They stood side by side before the heart, ankle deep in glowing water, their bells raised. The vibrations intensified until the air itself seemed to tremble, and the sound of the distant 7 colossal bells merged into a single, ringing tone that set the entire cavern alight. Elias glanced at her, his expression calm despite the storm raging above and below them. "Maya," he said softly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "No matter what happens, I'll follow your lead." Her chest tightened at the weight of his words, and for a heartbeat, everything, the storm, the sea, the city fell away, leaving only the two of them, bound by sound and fate alike. "Together," she whispered. "Always," he replied. The crimson bell and the green bell touched. The instant they met, a note burst into existence, high, clear, and endless, reverberating through stone, water, and bone. The heart of the tide pulsed violently, releasing waves of light that climbed the walls like fire. And then the shadows below screamed. The scream rose from the depths, low, vast, and unearthly, rolling upward through the drowned city like a wave of pure force. The ground beneath Maya's boots shook violently, sending ripples through the glowing water around her knees. Overhead, the colossal bells began to toll again, one after another, their immense voices clashing against the rising roar from below. The heart of the tide pulsed wildly now, its translucent surface fractured by streaks of light that bled outward into the chamber. Shadows twisted in the depths beneath them, vast shapes unfurling, spiraling slowly upward. The deep one was waking. Maya gripped the crimson bell so tightly her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Elias raised his green corded bell, his jaw set, sea glass eyes reflecting the violent glow of the heart. The two of them stood ankle deep in the trembling water, bodies framed by lightning flaring through cracks in the stone ceiling far above. "Maya," Elias said, voice hoarse over the roar, "if we start this and it fails, then we don't fail." She cut him off, her voice steadier than her pulse. "Two listeners, one voice, that's what the heart told us." Elias met her gaze for the briefest instant, and in that moment, neither of them needed to speak. Together, always, the heart flared, responding to their intent. Their bells vibrated violently, the hum so intense it numbed Maya's fingertips. She raised the crimson bell, Elias mirroring her, and the two metals touched once more. The sound that burst from them wasn't just a tone this time. It was a song, deep and endless, carrying the voices of the drowned city itself. All 7 colossal bells above answered in perfect harmony, their ancient voices resonating through the walls, the water, the bones of the earth. The storm outside screamed in reply, rain lashing the ruined towers above, lightning carving wild veins through the night sky. The heart absorbed their sound, its fractured surface glowing brighter and brighter, until the entire cavern was bathed in pale silver light. The water surged outward in waves of force, whipping around them, but never touching them, as though the sea itself bent away to listen. The whispers returned clearer now, layered but unified. A single consciousness speaking through thousands of remembered voices. One voice binds, one voice silences, one voice remembers. Maya shut her eyes, letting the song move through her, breathing in rhythm with the resonance thrumming in her chest. She felt Elias beside her, his presence like an anchor holding her steady as their bells guided the sound through the heart. But then the deep one screamed again, and the entire cavern shook violently, sending sprays of glowing water high into the air. Maya staggered, almost dropping her bell. But Elias caught her arm, steadying her without breaking the harmony. Their eyes met, her breath ragged, his shoulders tense, and somehow the connection between them sharpened into something more than trust, more than fear, more than fate. It was as if the bells were pulling not just sound, but everything they were into one single note. Two listeners, one voice. The heart reacted, blazing brighter, until it became nearly impossible to look at directly. The fractured surface knit together, smooth and whole again, as the sound spiraled deeper and deeper into the water below. And then they felt it, the shift. The shadows beneath the drowned city writhed violently, coiling and uncoiling in shapes too vast to comprehend. The deep ones strained against the binding, its roar reverberating in their skulls like an ocean inside their bones. The water swirled violently, towering columns rising and collapsing, as though the sea itself wanted to escape its body. Maya's knees buckled under the force, but Elias reached for her hand, fingers locking tight around hers. He leaned closer, his voice firm despite the chaos. "Stay with me," he said. "I'm here," she whispered back, though her throat burned with the pressure of the sound. They lifted the bells one final time. The note changed. It grew sharper, higher, breaking through the storm and plunging deeper than the waves. The heart released a blinding surge of light that spilled into the sea, racing along every submerged street, every shattered column, every forgotten tower of the drowned city. One by one, the colossal bells joined, tolling not in chaos but perfect unity. And then the scream from below cut off. The deep one's roar became a shudder, then a ripple, and finally silence. The trembling beneath their feet slowed, the spiraling shadows stilled, curling deep beneath the glowing water, like a beast returning to sleep. The silver path outside the chamber dimmed to a faint shimmer, its unnatural brightness fading into the natural rhythms of tide and storm. The heart of the tide pulsed softly once more. No longer fractured, no longer wild, restored. Maya lowered her bell slowly, her entire body trembling from exhaustion, though relief coursed through her veins like warmth after cold. Elias stood beside her, chest rising and falling heavily, the green-corded bell loose in his hand. He turned to her, brushing damp strands of hair from her cheek with trembling fingers, his touch hesitant but steady. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head, meeting his gaze, rainwater glittering on her lashes. "We did it." For a moment, they just stood there, the echoes of the song fading into silence, the storm above finally softening to a gentle drizzle. Then, almost without meaning to, Maya stepped closer. Elias didn't move away. Their foreheads touched lightly, breath mingling, the glow of the heart painting their skin silver. In the silence, she felt his pulse match hers. And though neither of them spoke, the bells still hummed faintly in her hand, carrying an unspoken promise. Together, always. When they climbed back to the surface, Greyhaven lay beneath lighthouse beam swept calmly across the quiet harbor, its rhythm steady and unbroken, as though the storm had never risen at all. The shop lights of Umbra and ink glimmered faintly in the distance, warm and inviting. For the first time in her life, Maya felt as though the town was breathing with her, as though the rain had always been waiting for this moment, as though the bells had been guiding her here all along. Elias took her hand, and together they walked back into the waiting night. And high above them, hidden among the clouds, the storm whispered softly to itself, carrying their secret out to sea. The storm remembers.